Thomas Wallgren, eminent scholar and academic and activist and politician. So Thomas, could you give us a kind of an overview? Let us assume that many of the people listening in are unfamiliar with the discourse on nonviolence. So would you give us a very brief overview, say in about 7 or 10 minutes, on how you see that nonviolence has developed since, Gandhi left this world, at least in bodily form?
Let me make 4 points based on Rajna's imitation. The first is just to note that I think in the modern world, it is true that Gandhi is sort of the main reference point when we talk about nonviolence, both because of what he wrote and what he said, and because of his practice. And his influence has been felt on all continents. But as Rajni already pointed out, it's important to understand that Gandhi stands at the crossroad of many traditions. He doesn't invent, and of course he didn't himself think that he invented Ahimsa. On the contrary, that's very central to Gandhi's thinking about the tradition which he saw himself as representing, that the conviction of the truth of the overwhelming power of Ahimsa, that is as old as the mountains and the trees. So it's a question of relating to eternal truths rather than discovering them. But then it's very important I think one invention which made Gandhi relevant for the modern world, not only the impressive record of his life, but also a key idea here is experiments with truth. That nobody will possess, or nobody will have non-violence available to him or herself in full. So the best we can do, aspire for as human beings, is to do our experiments. And one could say, and now I'll link a little bit to what was said about Western philosophy, in a certain sense, our lives are only truly our lives to the extent that they are experiments with truth. Otherwise, they are reactions to tradition. They are something which is not ourself. So that's and one last point about Gandhi, which I think is very important to place him in the conversations we have today, is the tremendous extent to which his rediscovery for himself and for the world of the force of nonviolence happened in a conversation between cultures. There's a very strong element of the various cultural traditions in India, of Jainism and of Buddhism and of Hinduism, and also Indian secular traditions, but there's also a very strong exposure, an important exposure to the Western philosophical tradition and religious traditions. So Jesus of Nazareth and Socrates are important references for Gandhi. And of course, the social movements of his times. Tolstoy is a major influence there as well. So that's my one point, that Gandhi indeed is a very remarkable practitioner of Ahimsa, but he stands and saw himself standing in a tradition which nobody will ever be perfect, but we can always aspire for leading our lives in the light of these ideals. The more we do so, the better for us and for humankind and for everything that there is. That's my first point. If I may, more briefly, 3 points about things I'm involved in now, just to give you a sense of what the search for Ahimsa can mean to somebody who is presently based in Helsinki, academic profession, lots of social activism. I want to share with you 3 remarks. The first is that I've been happily part of the movement called the climate justice movement, which is an important social movement in our part of the world. I think all over the planet, but not least in the North Atlantic region, including Finland. Now, the climate justice movement has a branch called Extinction Rebellion, which is a Finnish branch called Elo Kapina. It's the only Raj XR which has a domestic name. Elo Kapina is a Finnish climate justice direct action group. And I think it's mainly young people, but many others are there. I must say I've been extremely empowered by the rise of the XR movement and Elo Kapina, and very proud to have been part of extremely inspiring meetings with young people, with people I didn't know before in nonviolent direct action in Finland last year. We had a good action, really tremendous action in August, and another one in October in Helsinki, with maybe 100 people coming together to practice nonviolent action. We got our fines, we were carried away by the police, and we demonstrated our passion, our passionate desire to have this wake-up call for climate justice globally. So, and it has inspired, it has influenced discourse in Finland. So there is a practice which goes back and is very directly influenced by the Gandhian tradition. So that's one. Of course, it's not perfect, but these experiments are there, and it's practiced in Finland at the moment. So that's one. The second, I think we have a lot of pessimism in my part of the world about the future of the planet because of climate change. There's also fear of what migration will do to our culture. There's a kind of sense of despondency. We must also record our victories. And we had on Friday an amazing achievement produced by people working together, millions of people working for decades. And this Friday was the day when the United Nations treaty banning nuclear weapons came into force. And that is an achievement of the peace movement, especially the Network International Coalition for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons. Now, we don't know, but we have the right to hope that this treaty is one more step in the progress towards the eternal peace that Gandhi and many others have dreamt of, and that I think we need to keep alive in our heart as a possible future and as maybe the inevitable future for humankind. Thirdly, I would just point to the difficulty of working with the concept of Ahimsa in the Western tradition. So you see, I think the Western knowledge tradition is quite ambiguous on the question of truth and nonviolence. Especially the modern scientific and technological tradition of knowledge is not committed to the unity of the search for knowledge and nonviolence. On the contrary, we see in some of the modern classics in our philosophy, classics like Francis Bacon and Thomas Hobbes, we see an idea that the truth of the human being is that we are violent, that we're prone to violence, ready to kill each other for our own benefit. There's also in Francis Bacon the idea that in order to squeeze truth out of nature, you have this idea that the scientist goes to the laboratory and squeezes with, through painful experiments on nature, you squeeze the truth out of Mother Nature. So there's a sense of domination, a sense of the power of truth being connected with violence, which is one element in our philosophical tradition, a very sad element, I think, very destructive. One of the key reasons for the failure of the modern civilization to create prosperity with peace for all species and for all people. So I want to record that, but I also want to record that I think maybe such is the state of most civilizations, that we have these various resources, and also the Western tradition, and I want to emphasize that. We have rich resources for seeing truth and nonviolence as united. One is, of course, I mentioned already, Jesus of Nazareth. In the Christian tradition, you have many strands, but one is a very strongly nonviolent strand. We also have, let me check what I want to mention second. We have the idea of the equal dignity of all people, inviting respect, inviting the respect which cannot, in the end of the day, include violence. And then we have, and that's a thing I work on academically, we have a tradition which the search for truth has to be dialogic. Nobody has access to truth, him or herself. We must search together. This is very, very strongly emphasized in Socrates, whom Gandhi read in Socrates' Apology. It's very strong in some of the late ancient philosophers, the Pyrrhonian skeptics especially, and it's very, very strong in the hero of Western philosophy, 20th century, a man called Ludwig Wittgenstein, that the deepest search for truth has to happen in dialogue. And when there is dialogue, there can't be violence, because you cannot learn from the other. You cannot get the other's help to enrich your understanding unless the encounter with the other is non-violent. Torture will not give you truth. So it's only the open-minded dialogue with the other. And I also need that, not only for the other, but for myself, for my own search for truth. And that is a resource which is alive in our tradition. So we have this ambiguity within our civilization, and I think one way to contribute to Ahimsa is to try to strengthen those resources which we have and see how they relate to other similar resources in other civilizations. So the dialogue between you and me can be, and always at best is, a dialogue also between cultural traditions. So let me stop there. I hope I wasn't too long-winded, but I'm very happy that we can share some thinking about this.
No, thank you so much, Thomas. That was very rich, and as always, it's so inspiring.